Dawn broke over Kharkiv's eastern plains, but the horizon was already burning. Precisely at 5:17 a.m., Ukrainian reconnaissance drones picked up something massive columns of Russian armor, 216 tanks in total, pushing through the low mist along the Belgorod-Kupiansk corridor. It looked unstoppable, a steel wave moving with mechanical precision. Then, at 5:26 a.m., the sky lit up. HIMARS batteries hidden deep in woodland zones unleashed a sudden, coordinated strike. The first salvos struck the convoy's lead units. The shockwave rolled across the steppe like thunder. In seconds, the advance that took weeks to prepare turned into chaos. Command links fractured, communications went silent. What happened next wasn't luck, it was calculation. Ukraine had waited for this exact moment. The trap was perfect. But how did Kiev know to the minute when those 216 tanks would enter the kill zone? If you crave clarity over noise, if precision military analysis matters to you, hit that subscribe button. Stay sharp, stay informed. At 5 a.m., the corridor was a study in disciplined motion. Russian command elements had synchronized logistics, artillery, and armor. 3 motor rifle brigades in echelon, air defense detachments screening the flanks, engineers paving an axis for the heavy columns. The heart of the advance was unmistakable, a spear of 216 tanks, tracked and black against the mud, rolling along parallel routes with engineer teams smoothing choke points. Recon elements and forward observers probed ahead, hunting for weak points in Ukraine's belt of defenses. Ukraine did not meet the spearhead head-on. Instead, Kiev's commanders dispersed. Mobile anti-tank teams, Javelin and NLAW crews shadowed choke points, while small mechanized groups pulled back to prepared kill sectors. Electronic warfare crews emplaced in wooded folds. Forward reconnaissance drones mapped the precise formation geometry of those 216 tanks, and fed continuous telemetry to a command node that would not act until every piece of the plan was aligned. At 5:17 a.m., precision mattered. As the columns approached the designated kill zone, Ukraine's layered defense tightened. Short-range air defenses masked key positions, anti-drone rifles and soft-kill systems degraded enemy ISR, and camouflage nets hid mobile rocket batteries. Mines and deep emplacement obstacles forced the armor into narrower lanes, exactly where planners wanted them. At 5:26 am, the first phase, counter-recon and suppression. Electronic attacks targeted Russian datalinks and ADS nodes, slowing brigade-level situational awareness. Recon UAVs drew flares and coaxed the formation into revealing its density. At this moment, HIMARS units that had been repositioned overnight aligned their targeting solutions. HIMARS launches are not just fire. They are synchronization, satellite time, meteorological inputs, and coordinated timing to the second. Multiple launchers fired in sequence salvos to create overlapping effects on the convoy's command and logistics nodes. HIMARS strikes landed not merely on tanks, but on the command vehicles and fuel trains feeding the 216 tanks. Deprived of refuel points and with logistics elements disrupted, the forward push lost momentum. Simultaneously, coastal artillery-style precision fire-guided artillery and rocket volleys delivered area denial across the lanes, turning movement corridors into lethal funnels. The combination of HIMARS long-range precision fires and shorter-range tube artillery created cascading failures in the Russian tempo. At 6:10 a.m., the second phase, exploitation. Ukrainian mobile groups surged from concealed positions to engage immobilized armor and salvage materiel. Javelin teams focused on the flanks and rear of the stranded Russian tanks, using defilade to remain elusive. Air assets, constrained by contested airspace and layered Russian air defenses, provided overwatch where safe corridors existed, and electronic warfare continued to blunt adversary ISR. Throughout, the fight was not purely kinetic. Cyber and YO strikes had injected latency into Russian command chains, delays in orders multiplied confusion. Psychological operations broadcast targeted communications to isolated crews, urging surrender or withdrawal. The combined arms choreography meant the 216 tanks never realized their initial operational advantage. Instead, they found themselves incrementally constricted by precision fires, anti-armor ambushes, and disrupted logistics. By 07:00, the Russian tempo had fractured. A formation that was poised to break the front now grappled with contingency, how to extricate hundreds of heavy vehicles without exposing repair crews and fuel trains. The engagement had been surgical. Not every vehicle destroyed, but the cohesion of the push neutralized. Ukraine had used time, space, and precision weapons to transform an advancing mass of 216 tanks into a dispersed, vulnerable target set, and had done so with disciplined restraint, avoiding indiscriminate destruction and emphasizing capture, interdiction, and strategic denial. By 7:15 a.m., the battlefield around Kupiansk had become a live experiment in 21st-century warfare. The Russian armored spearhead, once coordinated, confident, and fuel-fed, was now split into 3 isolated clusters. Columns that had advanced in near-perfect formation were forced to halt, pivot, and scatter under the pressure of precision strikes. Ukraine's defensive doctrine, honed after 3 years of adaptive warfare, came into full view. It was not brute resistance, it was algorithmic warfare. Layered defenses fused artillery, drones, and electronic warfare into one integrated grid. Each strike request passed through a real-time AI-assisted targeting network. Thermal imagery, satellite reconnaissance, and acoustic sensors feeding command posts buried deep in concrete bunkers. When the Russian tanks fired, Ukrainian counter-battery radars responded within seconds. The first defensive layer long-range fires continued suppressing command posts and logistics. HIMARS and M270 MLRS systems delivered rolling salvos, ensuring no safe rear for refueling or repair. The second layer medium-range air denial engaged Russian rotary and fixed-wing assets. NASAMS and IRIS-T SLM systems, backed by Jeopard guns, intercepted Ka-52s and Su-25s attempting to provide cover. The third layer short-range ground maneuver was the decisive factor. Dispersed Ukrainian units striking from tree lines, crossing fields, and vanishing before return fire could be directed. At 7:40 a.m., Russia escalated. 2 214R reconnaissance aircraft transmitted coordinates to artillery brigades positioned north of Belgrade. Within minutes, Smerch and Tornado-S rocket launchers began a counter-barrage. The objective: suppress the HIMARS batteries and break Ukraine's kill grid. Explosions echoed across the plains, calculated, dense, and sustained. But Ukraine had anticipated this. Decoy emitters and false radar signatures had been placed precisely to absorb enemy attention. Several HIMARS launch sites were, in reality, empty fields with thermal decoys flickering under camouflage netting. By 8:10 a.m., Russian artillery fire began to wane as counter-battery radars pinpointed their origin. Ukrainian precision-guided 155 rounds struck at those positions within minutes. The duel of artillery turned into a contest of survivability, where mobility and speed decided endurance. Meanwhile, Ukrainian engineers activated the fourth layer terrain modification. Explosive barriers and pre-laid demolition lines cut off retreat corridors. Drones dropped sensor mines to shape enemy movement. What appeared from above as chaotic destruction was, in truth, deliberate geometry. The Russians were being funneled into low-lying flood zones east of the river, the designated containment basin. By 8:45 a.m., visual feeds from reconnaissance drones showed what commanders had hoped for: a concentration of Russian tanks in a narrow corridor. Their flanks now trapped by marshy ground and their supply lines shattered, the once massive advance had turned into an encircled formation. The layered defense, electronic, kinetic, and psychological, had achieved its aim. Instead of stopping the offensive at the front, Ukraine had bled it from within, turning momentum into paralysis. And yet, everyone on the Ukrainian side knew the battle was far from over. Russia's doctrine demanded escalation, and the next move could change everything. By 9:10 a.m., the situation reached a knife's edge. The Ukrainian ambush had shattered the initial Russian advance, but the counter-response was imminent and ruthless. From command posts near Shebekino, Russian generals ordered a tactical regrouping supported by heavy air and missile assets. Surveillance satellites confirmed the emergence of Su-34 and Su-57 sorties, their contrails streaking high above the cloud line, supported by A-50U AWACS coordination. The objective was clear: regain command of the air, locate the HIMARS batteries, and reassert armored dominance before total disarray set in. At 09:24 a.m., the Russian aerospace forces launched their suppression of enemy air defenses campaign. Anti-radiation missiles, KH-31P, KH-58 screamed toward suspected radar sources. Explosions lit up the forest line, but most were dummies. Ukraine's command had already shifted its active radars 20 minutes earlier, leaving behind decoy emitters. The true air defense systems, including NASAMS, IRIS-T, and Patriot batteries, remained silent, waiting. The trap snapped shut at 9:33 a.m. As Su-34s dove in low to strike what appeared to be artillery positions, Patriot launchers locked on. Within seconds, interceptors tore through the clouds, 1, 2, then 3 detonations. Russian pilots evaded where possible, but the radar coverage net was relentless. Of 6 attacking jets, 3 vanished from the airspace within minutes. Meanwhile, on the ground, Ukrainian armored brigades initiated the Iron Mirror phase, a planned countermaneuver using captured terrain and residual Russian confusion. Mobile T-64BV and Leopard 2A6 tanks, concealed overnight in abandoned farmsteads, surged forward to exploit the corridor of trapped enemy armor. Drone footage revealed the spectacle. 216 Russian tanks in disarray, firing sporadically without coherent command. Smoke columns and electronic jamming blurred friend from foe. By 10 a.m., the counterassault was synchronized. Ukrainian artillery stopped long-range bombardments to avoid blue-on-blue engagements. Instead, loitering munitions, Switchblade 600s and FPV drones picked off static targets one by one, forcing surviving crews to abandon vehicles. The result was devastating, not in destruction but in confusion. Crew morale cracked. Commanders radioed for air support that no longer answered. Yet Russia was not beaten, not yet. The Southern Command authorized the deployment of Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles, striking at Ukrainian logistical nodes and bridges along the Oskil River. 2 impacts were confirmed near Izium and Borova at 10:17 a.m. Though civilian damage was minimal due to prior evacuation orders, these strikes revealed the depth of escalation Moscow was willing to accept. For observers in NATO and Washington, this was the moment that mattered. It wasn't just another clash of armor, it was a test of doctrine. Could precision, coordination, and technological integration truly outmatch brute force? By 10:30 a.m., both sides had reached operational exhaustion. The battlefield was silent except for drone rotors and the crackle of burning fuel. In Kiev's operations center, analysts confirmed the unthinkable. Out of 216 tanks, fewer than 90 remained operational, most immobilized or trapped. The counter-response had come, but Ukraine's defense had held for now. Something, however, was about to shift again. An unseen player was already entering the fight. At 11 a.m., Ukrainian radar screens began to flicker. Not from jamming, but from blank spaces. Entire grid sectors vanished from digital displays. Commanders assumed a system fault, but the timing was too precise. Seconds later, confirmation arrived from the Cyber Warfare Division in Lviv. A massive coordinated cyber intrusion was underway. The attack targeted battlefield communications, GPS signals, and encrypted drone networks simultaneously. For the first time in hours, Ukrainian artillery lost synchronization. Drone feeds froze mid-frame, HIMARS batteries went dark for 7 agonizing minutes, and field units reverted to manual fire control. Russia had triggered a cyber counterstrike, but the source wasn't local. The digital fingerprint traced back beyond Russian nodes, routed through offshore servers, suggesting foreign coordination. At 11:07 a.m., chaos deepened when Ukrainian drones dropped offline mid-flight. In the void, something else appeared on radar: unknown aircraft signatures entering the battle space from the northeast. Not Russian, not NATO, unmarked. They carried out no strikes, transmitted no IFF codes, and vanished as suddenly as they appeared. For field commanders, it was a nightmare. Jamming, spoofed coordinates, ghost aircraft, and broken comms. Yet amid the digital fog, Ukraine's old-school redundancy analog rangefinders, field radios, paper maps kept the defense alive. Within minutes, power was rerouted to offline systems. Engineers isolated infected nodes, and the network rebooted on a secure frequency. By 11:30 a.m., control returned. The HIMARS came back online, drone relays reconnected. But something had changed. The sense of battlefield clarity was gone. Someone else had reached into the conflict's neural network, testing both nations' digital nerves. In Kiev's bunker, one officer summed it up quietly. This wasn't just Russia, someone's learning how we fight. The Battle of Belgorod-Kupiansk would later be studied in war colleges, not for its destruction, but for its complexity, a clash where precision, deception, and data warfare converged. Ukraine's successful ambush of 216 Russian tanks demonstrated more than tactical ingenuity. It revealed a shift in global doctrine. Wars of the future would not be decided solely by armor or artillery, but by information dominance, the ability to sense, decide, and strike faster than the enemy could comprehend. Analysts at NATO's Allied Command reviewed the engagement minute by minute. The findings were clear. Ukraine's fusion of Western technology, HIMARS precision strikes, Patriot air defense layers, and AI-assisted drone reconnaissance had outperformed numerical superiority. A smaller, adaptive force had dismantled a mass formation through timing, deception, and digital synchronization. This was not coincidence. It was the fruit of training, intelligence sharing, and the silent backbone of transatlantic cooperation. Yet the cyber twist introduced a darker realization. The battlefield was no longer isolated. An unidentified third-party actor, possibly a state or private entity, had demonstrated the capacity to penetrate and manipulate real-time combat networks. This blurred the line between war and intrusion, sovereignty and surveillance. In Washington and Brussels, the incident reinforced a simple truth: deterrence now extended into cyberspace. The US and its NATO allies began reviewing digital defense protocols, drone encryption standards, and contingency measures for joint operations. For Russia, the loss of armored cohesion exposed structural flaws. Rigid command hierarchies, slow adaptation, and outdated electronic warfare doctrine. For Ukraine, it marked validation proof that asymmetric strategy could hold back superior firepower when backed by intelligence, precision, and discipline. The message echoed across the alliance: technology wins battles, but unity wins
Someone's
wars.
learning how we fight.
By nightfall, the fires over the Kupiansk plain had dimmed, leaving only the low hum of recovery drones and the glow of command screens. What began as a test of armor and endurance ended as a revelation of how war itself had changed. Ukraine's ambush of 216 Russian tanks was not just a tactical success, it was a statement. Precision, patience, and intelligence had overcome brute force. The engagement proved that in modern conflict, control of data, timing, and perception can outweigh tonnage, armor, and volume of fire. The battlefield was no longer defined by territory alone, but by bandwidth, encryption, and the speed of decision-making. For NATO observers, this was affirmation. The doctrines of integration, adaptability, and high-tech deterrence work. For Washington, it underscored why America's commitment to maintaining global order remains essential. And for Kyiv, it was both a victory and a warning: technology can equalize power, but it can also expose new vulnerabilities. When the cyber interference was later traced to unknown global servers, one line from the after-action report stood out. The next great conflict may begin not with missiles, but with silence, the silence of a network gone dark. War has changed, but one principle endures: strength deters chaos. Peace is not born of weakness, it's maintained by vigilance. If clarity matters to you, if you believe strength preserves peace, subscribe and stay with us. Because the next front line may be invisible and already forming.